It's January 1971, and Jim Morrison is standing in a small mixing room in West Hollywood called Poppy Studios. The album is finished, the vocals are done, the band has already moved on to mixing. But Morrison wants to add one more thing. He steps to the microphone, leans in, and whispers. The entire lyric of Riders on the Storm breathed underneath his own lead vocal. It was not a harmony, and it wasn't a double take. A ghost of his own voice, buried so deep in the mix that most people have never even noticed that it's there. 6 months later, Jim Morrison was dead in a Paris bathtub. He was 27. And that whisper, that single overdub on a January afternoon, was the last thing he ever committed to tape. Ray Manzarek said it plainly years later. There's a whisper voice on Riders on the Storm, if you listen closely.
That whisper voice that's just singing, Riders on the Storm. You can hear that in the last two Riders on the Storm. That's Jim's spirit whispering to us from the ether.
That's the last thing he ever did. This is the story of how that song came to exist. A story that involves a producer walking out in disgust, a cowboy campfire tune from 1948, and a real killer who murdered 6 people on the American highway. By December 1970, the Doors were a band running out of road. The Miami obscenity trial had ended in September with a conviction. The big venues wouldn't took them.
So he was found guilty on 2 counts, facing 3 years, perhaps less, a year and a half in Rayford Penitentiary.
Jim's a free spirit. It was almost an insurmountable assault on his consciousness to threaten him with that.
The tour we had was canceled. We had a tour of 20 cities. Miami was city number 1.
We couldn't play anywhere. The Hall Owners Association had a big meeting, and they banned us from most of the major halls in the United States.
It almost killed the band, and it probably killed Jim.
Morrison was bearded, heavy, drinking with intent, and he was openly telling the others that he wanted out of performing, out of Los Angeles, maybe out of music altogether. Basically, things had been sliding since Miami. Jim was really not interested after about the 3rd album. He wanted to do other things. He wanted to write, wanted to be an actor. He had a plane ticket to Paris in his future, and everyone around him could feel it. What the band needed was a 6th album for Elektra. What they got at first was a disaster. Because 2 weeks into the sessions, the one man who had shaped every Doors record ever made stood up and walked out. Paul Rothchild had produced all 5 Doors albums. He was a perfectionist of the punishing kind. The Soft Parade sessions had famously demanded take after take until the songs lay flat on the table. The most complete were LA Woman and Riders on the Storm, both of which I thought were great songs. My problem was I couldn't get them to play either of them decently. It was like watching an 80-year-old man trying to run the marathon. The band was exhausted by him. He was exhausted by them and by a singer who now arrived at sessions drunk, unpredictable, or not at all. When rehearsals for the new record began, Rothschild listened to the material taking shape and dismissed it with 2 words that have followed him ever since: cocktail music. As normal, we played the songs to Paul Rothschild, and he just didn't dig it. He was bored and said Riders on the Storm was like cocktail music. I didn't know what to make of that.
They didn't feel that they needed to be told anymore what to do. They knew what to do. And he's sitting there and listening to Riders on the Storm and going, that's fucking cocktail jazz. I mean, it sucks. I'm out of here. He says, I can't do this anymore.
The song he reportedly had in mind when he said it was Riders on the Storm. He quit, walked away from the biggest band on his label, 2 weeks into the sessions. It was the best thing that could have happened to them. When Paul removed himself, we felt the same as he did. We were out of school, we were free. The guy said to me, "What do you think we can do here?" And I said, "You guys like your rehearsal room?" The Doors retreated from the former studio entirely. They set up in their own rehearsal space, the Doors Workshop at 8512 Santa Monica Boulevard, with their longtime engineer Bruce Botnick promoted to co-producer. Botnick brought in bass player Jerry Sheff, on loan from Elvis Presley's touring band, to play live on the floor with them.
Jerry Sheff's there when he comes in. We've got the whole thing together. And Jerry Sheff says, "What's the bass line?" I said, "Like simple. E minor, A major." He said, "Oh man, that's impossible." I said, "What? For you? That's not impossible. Look at this. It's like nothing to it." And he said, That's on the piano, Ray. That's on the keyboard. Sure, that works great on the keyboard. There's nothing to it. Watch this on the bass guitar." And I don't know what the hell he did. He had to go through machinations, like turning his wrist up virtually upside down, inside out, trying to play it. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, man, but it sounds so good."
No clicks, no endless overdubs, no producers in a glass booth demanding take 31. It was the fastest time we recorded anything after the first album, all recorded live between the four of us. Very few takes. Jim in the bathroom with the door off. Not stoned, not drunk. Unless he was drunk, he was great to work with. The downstairs bathroom became the vocal booth. Jim was set up in the bathroom because it was so cramped. He stood in the doorway and sang the whole album, using the same mic he used on tour, which I think was an electro voice. Morrison sang with the door open, leaning into the doorframe, using the tiled walls for natural reverb. The man who had recorded in the best rooms in Los Angeles cut his final album singing next to a sink. And the music that came out of that room was looser, warmer, and more alive than anything they had made in years. Rothschild heard cocktail music, but what the band heard was themselves, for the first time since 1967, playing in a room together with nobody watching. But when we were doing LA Woman, Jim got empowered by the responsibility of making the record ourselves. He had to pull the vocals out of himself. That was the difference.
I don't know. I get fed by Robbie's melody just by the, I'm an accompanist. I'm not a solo drummer. When I hear shit, I feel out how to enhance it.
But Riders on the Storm didn't begin in that room at all. It began around the campfire 22 years earlier. In 1948, a park ranger named Stan Jones wrote a cowboy song called Ghost Riders in the Sky, a campfire tale of damned cowboys condemned to chase the devil's cattle across an endless storm-torn sky. Vaughn Monroe took it to number one in 1949. Johnny Cash sang it. Everybody sang it. And one afternoon at the workshop, the Doors were jamming on it. Robbie and Jim were jamming something out of Ghost Riders in the Sky. I proposed the bass line in piano part. The jazzy style was my idea. Jim already had a story about the killer hitchhiker on the road.
So one day we're jamming in the studio, in our rehearsal studio, in the Doors workshop before we started recording, and for some reason or another, Robbie was playing his twang guitar, and we were doing old cowpoke went riding out one dark and windy day, and Jim said, "I got lyrics for that. I got lyrics for that," and he had Riders on the Storm, Riders on the Storm.
Robbie Krieger and John Densmore both told the same story. The band was running through Ghost Riders for fun, and somewhere inside that minor key gallop, something else started to surface.
And we're jamming, and it's got this sort of Western Clint Eastwood mood, you know.
And from there, it kind of morphed into more of like a and it kind of turned into Riders on the Storm.
The tempo slowed, the cowboys dissolved. Manzarek moved to the Fendi roads, and the galloping rhythm became something closer to falling water. Listen to his right hand on the finished track. Those descending electric piano runs aren't decoration, they are rain. Written as rain, played as rain, cascading down the keyboard in streams. Underneath it, Chef's bass works the same hypnotic figure for 7 minutes without once demanding attention. When we recorded it, Jerry Chef, the bass player, just played what Ray was playing with his left hand, and that's why it's so distinctive. It's not something a bass player would come up with. It has more of a jazzy melody to it. Botnick completed the picture in the mix, weaving in recordings of actual rain and thunder. We all thought of the idea of the sound effects, and Jim was the one who first said it out loud. Wouldn't it be cool to add rain and thunder? I used the electric sound effects recordings, and as we were mixing, I just pressed the button.
Bruce Botnick, you know, when Elektra was a really small label, they used to do weird stuff like sound effects. Okay, so Bruce would record, go out in the desert and record the thunder and lightning, stuff like that. And so that's what we used.
We put on the LP, and you know, and so we got continual thunder and rain that Bruce had previously recorded years before. Then we had a machine or two queued up to thunder claps so we could play God right after a guitar solo or something that we thought was brilliant.
The storm isn't behind the song. The storm is part of the arrangement, and it enters like an instrument, on cue. Serendipity worked so that all the thunder came in at all the right places. It took you somewhere. It was like a mini movie in our heads.
After we finished the song, he said, "Oh man, I've got super rain and thunder. It's Riders on the Storm. It's raining on the desert, right?" "Yeah, exactly, Bruce. Raining on the desert." He said, "We got to put in some rain and thunder." So sure enough, I mean, the whole thing starts with.
A novelty cowboy tune from 1948 slowed down, darkened, and dissolved into rainfall. That was the music. The lyric came from somewhere much darker. "There's a killer on the road. His brain is squirming like a toad." Morrison didn't invent that figure. He remembered him. In December 1950, a 22-year-old drifter from Joplin, Missouri, named Billy Cook, stood on a highway with his thumb up. He had the words "hard luck" tattooed across the fingers on his left hand, and a deformed right eyelid that never fully closed. Even when he slept, one eye stayed open. Over 22 days, Cook murdered 6 people, a family of 5. Carl Moser, his wife Thelma, their 3 young children, picked him up outside Oklahoma City. He forced them to drive in circles for 3 days, then shot all of them, and the family dog, and dropped the bodies down a mine shaft. He was caught in Mexico and executed in the San Quentin gas chamber in December 1952. America couldn't look away. Cook became the dark archetype of the age, the stranger at the roadside, the price of the open highway. Ida Lupino turned him into the film The Hitchhiker within a year of his execution. And Jim Morrison, a film student before he was ever a singer, carried that figure with him for years. In 1969, he wrote, produced, and starred in HWI, an American Pastoral, a 50-minute experimental film in which he plays a hitchhiker who kills the driver who picks him up. Jim had made a film, HWY, that was a road movie, and he played a hitchhiker who killed the guy that gave him a ride. He called his friend, the poet Michael McClure, and pretended that he had actually committed a murder just to get a reaction. He talked about expanding it into a full feature. The killer on the road wasn't lyric to him. It was a character he had already played. So when the band needed words for their Slow Rain ballad, Morrison reached for the figure he had been circling his whole creative life and put him in the third verse, sandwiched between two verses of something else entirely. Because here is what makes the lyric work. The killer only gets one verse. The rest of the song is a live. The rest of the song is a love plea. Girl, you gotta love your man. And an existential shock. Into this world we are thrown. Danger, love, and fatalism, side by side in the rain, with no resolution offered. It's not a song about the murderer, it's a song about exposure. Every rider on the same dark highway, and no shelter anywhere. It becomes a very spiritual song. You won't still occupy this body, but the essential life will never end. And love is the answer to all things. It gives the song a different perspective. The band cut it live at a workshop in a handful of takes.
We're all riders on the storm. I think that's everybody who has had vicissitudes in life, love in life, disappointments, never knowing exactly what's going to happen next, facing everything, a kind of bravery that we all have just to be alive.
And here's the part nobody in that room could have known. Riders on the Storm was the last song recorded for LA Woman. In January 1971, with the album in mixing or at Poppy Studios, Morrison added The Whisper. After we'd finished Riders on the Storm, I had this idea, which I suggested to Bruce Botnick, that Jim went back in and did another vocal that was just whispered. And it's really subliminal. Unless you know it's there, you don't hear it. The full lyric breathed beneath his own lead vocal, an echo of himself folded under the song like a second skin. Botnick tucked it low in the mix. You feel it more than you hear it. It was the last song recorded by The Doors, and the whisper voice is the last singing that Jim ever did in the studio, in the background on the ride out. How prophetic is that? A whisper fading away into eternity where he is now. Then Morrison was gone. In March, he flew to Paris with Pamela Curson.
Near the end of the mixing, Jim said that he wanted to go to Paris.
In one of my photos of the recording studio, there's a chalkboard. And written on that chalkboard are the words, a clean slate. Jim needed a clean slate.
I think that was his gift to the band. He could go do what he wanted to do if he worked with them on this next album, which I think he thought would be his last.
He said, I'm going to Paris. And we said, what? You're not finished yet, man. We're not finished with the record. We haven't mixed all the songs. He said, everything is fine, man. I've done all my vocals. You guys are doing fine. It's sounding great. I'm going to go to Paris with Pam.
Leaving the business of being a rock star behind. He never heard the finished album played back as a release. After he left for Paris, we didn't know what we were going to do or what he was going to do. He talked about returning, but his heart was always searching.
Did not really think, especially after I said goodbye to Jim, that he would ever come back as a member of any band.
There's no question Jim announced he was resigning. He was going to be a writer.
He never performed the song.
About 1971, Jim said, listen, I want to get away for a while. I want to take a little vacation. Hey, good idea, man. Album's finished, tours, let's just relax, take it easy. Where are you going to go? He said, well, I'm going to go to Paris. Great idea. Paris. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, American writers in Paris, an American in Paris. What could be better? And unfortunately, I never saw Jim Morrison again.
Jim Morrison died in Paris on July the 3rd, 1971.
My last message to Jim after he'd gone to Paris, I told him I had just quit drinking and it was time for him to quit too.
But he sounded lonely and distant, as if it wasn't panning out for him.
The song was arriving on American radio in the very days its singer was leaving the world. It climbed for 2 months afterward and peaked at number 14 in September. A hit sung by a dead man, with his own ghost whispering underneath the vocal.
The Doors again began to reach out with L.A. Woman, and I think L.A. Woman reflects in a way more precisely where Jim Morrison was at just prior to his death. I mean, Jim and the group were immensely satisfied with that album. I love Riders on the Storm. I think that's my favorite track from the last album that the Doors made with Jim.
No one planned that symmetry. No one could have, but it's why the whisper unsettles people once they know it's there. Every other posthumous vocal in rock is an accident of timing. This one sounds like intent. A man leaving a copy of his voice behind, folded inside the song before walking out the door. Paul Rothschild heard cocktail music and walked out. What he was actually hearing was a band with nothing left to prove, playing quietly in their own room while their singer said goodbye in the only language he trusted. A cowboy ghost story from 1948. A killer with one eye always open. A whisper under a vocal in a small room in January. None of these things belong together. And for 7 minutes and 9 seconds, they do. Morrison spent his whole public life shouting. The poet, the provocateur, the lizard king, all of it delivered at full voice, daring the world to look away. But the last thing he ever did in a recording studio was a whisper. Listen to the song again tonight. Headphones, lights down, wait for the rain. Somewhere under that vocal, fading in and out like weather, is the last sound Jim Morrison ever made. He's still in there, riding the storm.
I think Jim is an immortal. I think Dionysus went back to Mount Olympus. I think he's dwelling up there with the gods. And he's watching us down here, and he's laughing.
Thank you for watching the video, and please subscribe, like, and in comments, tell me what would you like to hear about next. Thank you and have a great day.